In 2003, a man named Joe Croce did something almost nobody does. He sold his company for millions less than it was worth, on purpose, so the people buying it wouldn't drown in debt. CiCi's Pizza was his whole life, the fifth largest pizza chain in America, and he handed it to a team he trusted and gave a fifth of the money to his church. Then the money men showed up. 4 different investment firms over the next 13 years. Each one bought the chain, squeezed it, and flipped it to the next. And not one of them had ever stood behind that buffet line at 6 o'clock on a Friday. By the time they were done, CiCi's had gone from 650 restaurants all the way to a bankruptcy courtroom. So how does a chain that big end up getting passed around like a used car until there's almost nothing left? That's the whole story. And it starts with the man who sold it cheap, and an accident in a strip mall in Plano, Texas. The year is 1985. Joe, an accountant by training, decides he'd rather make pizza than balance somebody else's ledger. His partner is a guy named Mike Cole. And the name CiCi's came from the simplest possible place. Both their last names started with C. No agency, no branding deck, just 2 letters on a sign. That first location was 1,200 square feet. Takeout only. No tables, no chairs, no buffet line, just a counter and an oven. But here's where the story turns. A couple years in, somebody at a second location tried setting out a lunch buffet just to fill the dead hours. And that little experiment didn't just work, it completely took over. People stopped showing up for the takeout. They came for the all-you-can-eat line. The patch for a slow Tuesday ate the entire business. And right there, in that moment, CiCi's found the one thing that would run the rest of its life. The room was the product, not the pizza. As long as people kept filling that room, the money worked. Remember that one, because everything that goes wrong later goes back to it. And here's a detail CiCi's is still proud of to this day. They claim they invented the pizza buffet. Most people hand that credit to Pizza Hut, but CiCi's says they were doing all-you-can-eat years earlier, and honestly, the timeline backs them up. So the next time somebody at the table gives the big chain the credit, you get to be the insufferable person who corrects them. You're welcome, and you could smell it before you paid. Warm dough and cheese and cinnamon sugar hitting you before the door even closed behind you. That was CiCi's calling card before you looked at the menu. Before you even picked up a tray, it told you everything about what you were walking into. The price at the start was $2.99, all you can eat, in 1985. The economics of it were almost comically simple. Dough, tomato sauce, mozzarella, the food cost on a pizza is close to nothing in bulk. As long as those seats were full, the margins were beautiful. But the second those seats weren't full, the whole equation collapsed. Because you still have to keep that buffet stocked and hot, whether 12 people show up or 112. We'll come back to that. Joe started franchising in 1987, and for a lot of families in a lot of mid-sized towns, a CiCi's looked like a golden ticket. You're selling pizza dough and tomato sauce at a 500% markup to people who are thrilled to be there. And there's a story about a guy named George Brown, a repair technician who used to fix the ovens at that first CiCi's location. Brown wanted in. He wanted to own one. And the founder personally loaned him the money to open a franchise in '91. That's who Joe was. He believed in this thing enough to stake his own cash on a repairman's dream. 145 locations by '97. 354 by 2000. Over 300 million in sales. But I want to stop talking about the numbers, because the numbers aren't why you're still watching. Here's what it was actually like. You pulled into a strip mall somewhere between a Dollar Tree and a nail salon. You walk through the door and the smell hit you. I've talked about it already, but I really need you to sit in it. Because every person who ever walked into a CiCi's remembers that smell before they remember anything else. Warm dough. Pepperoni grease. Cinnamon sugar from the dessert station. It shouldn't have worked together, but it did. You grabbed one of those brown plastic trays and you walked the line. Pepperoni, sausage, buffalo chicken, mac and cheese pizza, which was either the greatest idea anyone ever had or a crime against food depending on who you ask. And then at the end, the dessert bar. Apple, dessert pizza. Brownies, and those cinnamon rolls. Here's what a lot of people forget. You could walk up to the counter and request a specific pizza. Whatever you wanted. They'd make it fresh and bring it out, and you could stand there like a vulture and grab it the second it hit the line. You were paying $4.99 and custom ordering a pizza. In what universe does that math work? I still don't know. But they did it. And those cinnamon rolls. Nobody went to CiCi's for the pizza. I'm sorry. I know that's a take, but I believe it. The pizza was fine. It was buffet pizza. It did the job. But those cinnamon rolls at the dessert station, warm, gooey, cinnamon sugar dusted across the top, had absolutely no business being on a $4.99 buffet. I'm convinced the cinnamon rolls were carrying at least a third of this company's goodwill, and I cannot prove it, but I believe it in my bones. And then there was the arcade. The game zone in the back. If you were a kid, the second you cleared your plate, you were running back there with a fistful of quarters. If you were a parent, that arcade was the best $5 you ever spent because it bought you 20 minutes of peace at the table. This was the place you went on a Tuesday night with 4 kids after soccer practice because nowhere else could feed a family of 6 for under $30. It was birthday parties where the whole class showed up and somebody's mom ordered 3 custom pepperoni pizzas and they were gone in 4 minutes. Church groups on a Wednesday. College students with $12 and bottomless appetites. Your grandmother, who didn't eat pizza but came for the salad bar and the company. It was Friday night for people who didn't need fancy, they just needed enough. And CiCi's was always enough. And CiCi's knew what it was. The commercials had this little cartoon character called a character they called Pa Zini, a tiny inventor in a flying machine selling you on what they called endless pizza possibilities. They ran a spot with a character called Fast Rappin' Mac. The whole thing was goofy and cheap in a way that felt honest about itself. CiCi's never tried to be Pizza Hut. It was the all-you-can-eat place, and it owned that. Now, here's a thing that's easy to forget about the good years. That buffet price didn't stay at $2.99 forever. It crept. Slowly, over about 15 years, it drifted up toward the $3 mark. And then in the year 2000, CiCi's did something risky. They jumped the price to $3.99. A real bump for a chain whose entire identity was being the cheapest option on the block. But they didn't just raise it and hope. They earned it. They expanded the buffet, put out vegetables as toppings for the first time, redesigned the restaurants with a new red and green color scheme, and slapped on a new logo. And it worked. Sales climbed right through the price hike. For a value chain, pulling that off is genuinely hard. And it's a sign of how well run this thing was back when the founder still had his hands on it. Because through all of it, CiCi's had a reputation that would shock anybody who's been to a rough one lately. It was known as one of the cleanest, most affordable, most family-friendly chains in the entire country. Hold on to that, because it does not last. By 2009, 650 locations. 33 states, 5th largest pizza chain in America. They won an industry readers poll for best pizza chain 3 years in a row. Men's Health gave them top marks for healthy options out of 66 major chains, which, if you've ever eaten at a CiCi's, is the funniest fact I found making this. But here is what was true from the very first lunch buffet in Plano all the way to the top. Every dollar CiCi's made depended on people physically sitting in the building. No delivery worth mentioning, no takeout model, no backup plan. The room was the product. And in 24 years, nobody ever built a plan for what happens when the room empties out. So let's go back to that sale, because the details matter. When the founder sold in 2003, that trusted team he handed it to was backed by a private equity firm in Los Angeles called Levine Leichtman Capital Partners. The price was $41.5 million for a chain doing over $335 million a year in sales. That's selling your house for a tenth of what it's worth. He priced it low deliberately to keep the debt off the new owners' backs. But the firm behind the deal took a 28% stake. And private equity firms don't buy pizza chains because they love cinnamon rolls. They buy them to grow the numbers, clean the books, and sell to the next guy. Which is exactly what happened. Levine Leichtman held on for 4 years, then sold to a Canadian investment firm. Under those new owners, CiCi's actually hit its peak. 650 stores by 2009, 14 straight quarters of sales growth. On paper, that looked like the win. But that firm's job was never to love cinnamon rolls either. It was to make a return. And in 2016, they sold CiCi's again, this time to a New York investment group. By then, the chain had already shrunk to about 430 stores. 4 owners in 13 years. Each one did the math. Each one got out. And here's the part that Company Man, another guy who covered this story, put his finger on. Under Joe, for the first 15 years, CiCi's never closed a single restaurant. Not one. They didn't have to, because the founder was careful about who he let buy a franchise. But the year after he left, the new owners opened 97 new locations in a single year, their biggest jump ever. And to hit numbers like that, you stop being picky about who's running your restaurants. And none of them, not a single one, spent their years owning CiCi's, worrying about the people standing behind the buffet line at 6 in the evening on a Friday. And here's what that looks like from inside the building. Picture the manager at your local CiCi's, the one who'd been running that location for years. She knew which pizzas to put on the line at 5:30 because that's when the church crowd came through. She knew to fire extra cinnamon rolls on Friday because families hit harder on Fridays. She knew the regulars by face. And when corporate changed the dough and cut the buffet hours and stopped sending somebody out to fix the broken games in the arcade, she couldn't do a thing about it. She was running somebody else's restaurant on somebody else's recipe with somebody else's priorities. Multiply her by a few hundred, and that's what 4 owners in 13 years actually looks like at the store level. In 2009, the same year the chain hit its peak, CiCi's largest franchisee went bankrupt. A Dallas-based group called Marwin, 53 locations, filed Chapter 11 with nearly $20 million in liabilities. Your biggest operator going broke the same year you're celebrating your highest store count. That doesn't happen in a healthy system. And I want to head off the obvious guess right here. 2009. Big collapse starting. Your brain immediately jumps to the recession, right? The whole economy tanked, so of course a restaurant chain struggled. Except that's not what happened. CiCi's actually disclosed that its sales in the first week of 2009 were about 4% higher than the same week a year before. Think about that. When money gets tight and you can't afford your usual pizza place, where do you go? You go to the cheapest option in town, and that was CiCi's. The recession should have been the best thing that ever happened to a $5 buffet. So whatever was eating this company from the inside, it was strong enough to overpower a tailwind that was actively pushing customers through the door. That tells you the wound was self-inflicted. And the smell was still there when you walked in. But what was sitting under those heat lamps wasn't the same. The dough was different. The cheese was different. The pizza sat on the line longer. The dining rooms weren't as clean. The napkin dispensers were empty. The arcade machines were broken and stayed broken. Somebody on Reddit described the pizza as always doughy and greasy and guessed it was on purpose so it can sit out longer. Think about that. The pizza wasn't bad because they couldn't make it better. It was bad because better pizza dies faster on a buffet line, and turnover was the priority. They were making food built to survive sitting out, and you could taste every minute it spent there. One national buffet ranking put CiCi's dead last, not near the bottom. Last for quality, cleanliness, and overall experience. The chain that won Best Pizza 3 years running. Last. And you know who noticed first? The regulars. The family that came every Friday, that same booth by the window. They stopped showing up. Not all at once. Just one Friday they tried somewhere else, and then they tried somewhere else again, and then CiCi's wasn't the Friday spot anymore. And nobody at corporate, 3 time zones and 4 owners removed from that booth, ever noticed the empty seat. And while all of that was happening inside CiCi's, the pizza world was building something new outside of it. Starting around 2012, 2013, a wave of fast casual pizza places started spreading. Blaze Pizza, Mod Pizza, and a handful of copycats. You walked down a line, picked your toppings, watched them fire a personal pizza in a wood oven in 3 minutes. Fresh, hot, custom, about $8 to $10. LeBron James personally backed Blaze. And these places grew fast, some of them adding over 80% in sales in a single year. And here's why that mattered. A single person eating at one of those places was paying only a few bucks more than the CiCi's buffet by that point, but getting a pizza made right in front of them. Hot, fresh, their toppings. Out of an oven that was actually on. Meanwhile, CiCi's was offering a lukewarm slice from a heat lamp that might have been sitting there for 20 minutes. For a couple, you're spending almost the same money. For a solo lunch, the math didn't even favor CiCi's anymore. And that was the exact customer base CiCi's had counted on for decades. The person who wants variety, wants value, and wants to eat now. That person suddenly had a better option, and they took it. The room was still the product, but nobody buying and selling the company seemed to notice who was sitting in it or how many of them were quietly leaving. If you're enjoying this trip back, do me a favor and tap subscribe. I dig up these brands every week, the ones that were everywhere and then somehow weren't. There is another one waiting for you right after this. Now, back to CiCi's, because this is where the floor falls out. By 2019, CiCi's had about 420 locations, shrinking but functional. $177 million in revenue. Positive $14 million in operating income. The patient was sick, but the patient was on its feet. And then, March of 2020 happened. COVID hit every restaurant, but it did not hit every restaurant the same. Domino's had a delivery operation. Papa John's had a delivery operation. Pizza Hut had a delivery operation. Every major pizza chain in the country had spent years building the ability to get a box to your door without you ever walking inside. CiCi's had a buffet. And a dining room full of chairs that nobody was allowed to sit in. Their CFO, Richard Peabody, stood up in front of a bankruptcy judge in Dallas and said it plainly. Digital and delivery had been growing 300% faster than eating inside restaurants since 2014, and CiCi's had barely noticed. Approximately 99% of the company's revenue came from in-store dining. 99%. The room had been the whole business the entire time. And now the room was closed. Revenue dropped 57% in a single year. $177 million to $76 million. Operating income flipped from positive $14 million to negative $2.7 million. Total debt sat at about $82 million. 214 locations closed, 67 of them for good. On January 25th, 2021, CiCi's filed for Chapter 11 in the Northern District of Texas. 650 stores at the peak, down to 318 at filing. The company itself only had one location still operating. Everything else was franchise-run. The top 2 creditors were a real estate company and a cheese supplier. which tells you everything about the restaurant business. When you go down, you owe the landlord and the cheese guy. But somebody wanted this thing, and the rescue is where this story goes, somewhere nobody saw coming. Two cousins stepped in. Sunil Dharod, who ran a management company and already operated a pile of Applebee's and Sonic franchises, and his cousin Anand Gala, who ran the Muya burger chain. Through a joint venture they named Smiley Slice, they put up about $11 million, bought $82 million of CiCi's debt, converted the whole pile to equity, and pulled the company out of bankruptcy in under 2 months. And in year 1, it worked. They reportedly cleared over $10 million in profit. They started modernizing delivery apps, a rewards program that hit 1 million members in 8 months. They even teamed up with a Twitch streamer named Queso and renamed the mac and cheese pizza after him for a while. New energy, signs of life. But behind the press releases, the family was going to war. According to trial testimony covered by the Texas Lawbook, the junior partner alleged that the majority owner started pulling money out through his management company. In 2022, testimony showed the management fee jumped from $72,000 a month to $5 million a month. By 2023, those fees had reportedly hit $15 million for the year, paying for a personal chef and putting family members on the company payroll. Two cousins bought a bankrupt pizza chain for $11 million, cleared over $10 million in year 1. And by year 3, one was suing the other for $46 million. The junior partner filed suit in January of 2024. In July of 2025, a Dallas County jury deliberated about 5 hours and came back 10-2 in his favor, $46 million. The other side's lawyers say the real figure is closer to $23 million. Post-trial motions are pending. The majority owner still holds the controlling interest. A forced sale, a receiver, a legal appeal, nobody knows. It's still open. Meanwhile, out at the store level, franchisees in Alabama and Florida walked away from locations in 2025 worn down by 20-year-old equipment and remodel costs that didn't add up. Nobody at any level of this company seems to be getting along. So who killed CiCi's Pizza? Nobody did. Not one person, not one thing. 4 owners each took a piece when they bought and sold the company like a used car. The fast casual chains took a piece when they made fresh pizza feel worth the extra $3. The pandemic took the biggest piece of all because it emptied the only thing that ever mattered. The room. And the 2 men who pulled CiCi's out of the rubble are still fighting in a Dallas courtroom over what's left. Nobody killed it. They each just took a little. Today, CiCi's has about 270 locations, mostly in Texas and Florida, down from 650. The company says system-wide sales are up over 50% in 5 years, but those numbers come from the company. And the company is in the middle of a lawsuit with itself. They brought back the original $2.99 buffet price as a 40-year anniversary loyalty promotion, which is either a warm piece of nostalgia or a white flag, and I honestly can't tell which. But if you find one, and you walk through that door and you get hit with that smell, warm dough, pepperoni grease, cinnamon sugar, you'll know it in half a second. It's the same. Smaller, quieter, a little worse for wear, but it's the same smell. Same as it ever was. And that smell is CiCi's before it's anything else. Before the lawsuits and the bankruptcies and the heat lamps and the owners who never loved it the way Joe did. It's the smell that hit you at the door when you were 12, carrying a tray to a booth, about to eat until you couldn't move, and the whole thing cost less than a movie ticket. Which brings us all the way back to Joe, the founder, the man who sold it cheap because he loved it too much to hand it to strangers. He took less money, picked people he trusted, gave 1/5 of it to his church, and walked away hoping it'd be in good hands. And then it spent the next 20 years getting bought and sold by people who never once smelled the inside of one of these places. That's the saddest, most human thing about this whole story. He did everything right, and the thing he built still slipped away, one owner at a time. But here's the part I keep coming back to. Somewhere out there in one of those 270 buildings still standing, there's a line past the salad bar tonight. Kids at the arcade. Cinnamon rolls disappearing faster than anybody can restock them. A dad feeding the whole family on $20 and walking out a hero. It's smaller than it was. The pizza's probably a little worse than you remember. But for the people in that room, on that night, it's still exactly what it always was. Cheap, warm, more than enough, and somehow perfect. So tell me, which one was yours? What town? What year? Were you the kid eating 7 slices and sprinting to the arcade, or the parent doing the math on feeding 4 kids for under $20? And if you still go, is it the same one today, or did you grow up and pick a new one? Drop it below.